So how do you know what size drill bit to use for pre-drilling? Pre-drilling means drilling a hole in the wood so that the wood doesn't split, or to help with a particular task. Some people say use an 1/8 inch drill bit or a 16th inch drill bit and just use that for all your pre-drilling. I'm going to suggest a slightly different way to pre-drill. The first thing we need to do is determine what size diameter the screw shank is. And we can see that it kind of almost fits into 1/8. It fits into 9/64 with a little resistance, and it fits into 5/32 most easily. We're going to use either the 9/64 or the 5/32 for our drilling. My approach to this is that I only want to, if I'm drilling in from this piece of wood into that piece of wood, I really only need to pre-drill into the first piece of wood, because I want the screw to actually pass through the first piece of wood, but I want the screw threads to bite into the second piece of wood. If my two pieces of wood are stationed like this, I don't need to pre-drill into this piece. This piece is not going to split unless it's really dry. This piece, since you're so close to the end of the wood, this is where you're going to split. If I don't pre-drill here, this wood is going to split wherever I put the screw in. So this is the piece that you want to pre-drill. And you want to pre-drill so that you don't drill into this piece, because you want the screw threads to have as much biting power as possible. The two methods that we're discussing is one to use an 1/8 inch or even a 16th inch drill bit and pre-drill both. And you can do that. And that works just fine. But I think the better way to pre-drill is to pre-drill a hole in this piece of wood so that the screw moves freely through this piece of wood. It doesn't need to bite into this piece of wood, it only needs to bite into that piece of wood. If it's not too big of a diameter, the head of this is going to compress the two pieces of wood together. So I put my drill bit in the drill and I tighten down the chuck. And I want to make sure that I've put it in not halfway crooked, because it's really easy for the drill bits to get kind of lodged in between one of these jaws and go crooked. And you'll notice the minute you turn it on. And if it spins nicely, it's in there centered. If it goes all kinds of wobbly, then it's not centered. If you need to know where to pre-drill, you can take your other piece of wood and you can get a pencil and you can draw a line, because our pine is 3/4 of an inch, and we should be shooting for that center point of the 3/4 inch. That's where we want to be. We don't need to crowd the edge. We don't want to crowd the inside, or we're going to miss our piece of wood. So I want to put a drill there. I want to put a drill there. I want to put a drill there. I also don't need to crowd this outside edge. You need to keep the drill straight. You don't want to be going left and right. If you do that, and especially if the bit is smaller, especially if you're using that 16th inch bit, which is the alternate method that you may be recommended, if you get partway through and you shift slightly, you're going to break that bit all the time. I can go up to number 2 gear for drilling, number 2 speed. And that's how that goes. We drill the other 2 holes. Now, if we've drilled them right, our drywall screw should slide right in through there. And that works real well. Which brings us to the next question of what is the correct size of drywall screw for what purpose? And this is a 1 5/8 inch drywall screw. It's a little more than 1.5 of an inch. 5/8 is another 1/8 inch bigger than a half, because 1/2 inch is 4/8, and 4/8 is smaller than 5/8. So the general rule that I use is whatever material I'm going through, I need to use a screw that's at least twice as long. This is 3/4 inch pine. I need to use at least 1.5 inch size drywall screw. They don't make 1.5, they make 1 5/8. So I'm going to use 1 5/8 because 1 1/4, the next size down, is too small. I barely have 2 or 3 threads that are going to grip, and what they're going to do when I overscrew it, when I over tighten it, is that's going to strip out and nothing's going to hold. You go bigger than 1 5/8, it's a little bit overkill for this operation. You'll be doing things like this a lot, putting a piece of pine against another piece of pine. You'll be using other tools to do this too, pneumatic drivers and things. But if you're building a platform, you're going to be using 1x6 and you're going to be doing this exact task. You want to tighten it down until all that gap goes away. And you want to tighten it down until the screw is flush or slightly below the surface. You don't need to drive the screw halfway through the piece of wood. But you see that head of this screw is much bigger than the hole that I drilled, and I only drilled the hole into the first piece, so it's gripping really nicely into the second piece. I'm going to straighten this out a little bit so that I can put in my second screw. The other thing before you put in the second screw is that you want to have this first screw really snug and fit. If it's not really snug and fit, if there's a gap there, then this screw is going to lock that gap in place, and the second screw is going to reinforce that gap. And you're never going to be able to close that gap because all the screws are holding the two pieces of wood apart. So when you put the first one in, make sure the gap is gone and make sure that everything else is snug. And then when I do the second one, I'm going to take up all the rest of the gap. And there's no gap. Excellent. And the last one. And my 3 screws are flush. If my screw isn't flush, go ahead and put some pressure into it. Make it slightly below the surface. That's starting to be almost too much.